Welcome to Duck Bloke Tuning. Please like and subscribe and leave comments in the comment section.
Hey, Emil.
Hi, Timothy. How you've been doing?
I'm good, my friend. It's been a while since March, since you were here in lovely New York City.
Yes, lovely. Yeah, I fell in love with New York City. I didn't know that it's gonna happen like this, but I did. And it's not any kind of politeness or whatever.
Yeah, and I remember when you were asking what to do on your little bit of time off,
Yeah.
where to go, what to see, what to do, and you went to Central Park.
Yes, I did.
How was that?
Okay, it's a funny thing, but everything about New York is like absolutely wonderful, and the Central Park is wonderful as well. And I've been thinking, actually, why is it so? Because I was like absolutely amazed by almost everything. It's like, and I'm almost 40 years old. It's like it's not very easy to impress me, which I'm pretty sad about because when I was younger, maybe I was a little bit more emotional. But I was thinking, what's about it? It's like New York is nice. Oh, okay, I think it's objectively nice, but my reaction was much bigger, and I instantly understood it. That basically all the movies I've seen, or majority of movies I've seen 30 years, have these visuals, and my brain just connects these things like the streets, the signs, even the fire truck or whatever.
You have the
It
preconceived notion of what it's going to be, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And
And
and did it live up to that same preconceived notion, or did it change in any way when you
actually,
arrived?
kind of it did, kind of it did. Naturally, like in most of the movies, like there are some weird things happening. So probably my system
Definitely
was
entertaining.
expecting,
Yeah,
yeah, maybe like police chase or whatever.
yeah. Yeah.
And that didn't happen, fortunately. But rest of it, like, yeah, and the people there, extremely nice. I had many like random encounters, random and not so random, like the one with you, for an example, but with the citizens as well. And I think there is something about New York, this openness. I think that it's very welcoming it was very welcoming for me at least.
Yeah. Did you find that because I've lived overseas, right? I lived overseas
Mhm.
for 24 years. And I'm not from New York originally. I always had this preconceived notion based on the movies that New York people were really hard and they weren't
Okay.
going to be friendly and da da da.
Mhm.
No, it's not like that at all. But people are nice. And I loved meeting you at CanJam. I thought that was awesome. What is your background?
My background,
Yeah.
basically, I finished university studies. It's a funny thing because I made a bachelor's degree and it was called the kind of sound engineering, but it's a weird Polish phrase that maybe is closer to like not a movie director, but sound directing or something like that. But
Okay.
it's 85% of the acoustics and a little bit of the some artistic lectures and stuff like that. And also I finished my master's degree in acoustics, like normal proper acoustics, but I've started writing my thesis and I started some research for my thesis and then I dropped out.
No,
So
no, you're not a dropout. What are you talking about? You
I
got to make
know.
money, right? So, so,
Yeah,
so what you're telling me is you did your bachelor's degree and then you did further studies that were enough to do what you needed to do.
absolutely, yes. And I started to work actually, and this collided with my university studies, because if you need to take some like days off from your proper normal work and go to university, which some of the universities, people there have time, so
Yeah.
something come tomorrow, the lab isn't ready, the lab isn't open or whatever. So this where my relationship with this university dissolved slowly.
Okay. By the way, are you going to CanJam London?
I think I'm gonna fly there. Yeah.
I got to look at what that is. I never even thought to go, but it's a
Hmm.
cheap flight from New York. Maybe I'll go. Maybe I'll go to
Hmm.
London. I used to
It's
live there. I love London.
London is awesome. It's even cheaper from Warsaw. So probably I'm gonna just go there just to eat some fish and chips and meet the people at least.
Yeah, and hang out at Portobello markets. You got to check that out. So when did you start? When did you start Lime Ears? So what brought you to start Lime Ears? Let's talk about that. So sound engineering.
Yeah.
What got you into? Are you a musician as well, or you worked because with a bunch of musicians?
Okay. I think the story starts when I'm about 14 or 16 when I picked up the bass guitar. And once I picked up the bass guitar, I also started to be interested in sound engineering. My dream was to basically to make music, to record music. I had some a little bit, technical background. I started to do some weird things on computer, etc. And then I talked with one of Polish most famous sound engineers who was touring with my favorite band, and I just asked him, what should I do to be somebody like you? It was literally that simple. And he said, oh, you need to study sound engineering. So I went to the university. I finished university. I started to work as a acoustic designer. At first, I designed like cinemas, concert halls, etc., etc. I was specialized in acoustics, room acoustics, basically. So yeah, room acoustics, and a little bit of noise control, heating, ventilation systems, noise control, etc., etc. So I did some measurements, but I just did it because I had to. It wasn't that awesome, basically. And after that, then I started Limeyears, but it was going at first.
But you started Limeyears, but was it with IEMs?
Yes, with custom IEMs.
Okay,
Basically.
so what brought you? There's a little bit of a bridge there. So
Yeah.
when you were doing your music and you were studying the sound engineering, what got you to the IEM?
It's because of my background as a bass player, because I played in several, like, let's say, rock and roll bands. And as you can imagine, in a rock and roll band, it's loud. First, it's loud. And second of all, it's chaotic. So nobody actually knows if you are not working with the IEMs, if you're working with wedges and amplifiers and stuff like that, the rehearsals were very, very difficult they took their toll on me and my, thankfully not hearing, but at least well-being. And at the end of the day, I noticed that when it comes to record a demo or whatever, it's like you have to change all the arrangements because at the rehearsals, people, they weren't hearing each other. So their parts they don't align, So I was thinking it's impossible for professional bands to work like this, And I started to look up in the Google, and I've seen that musicians are working on IEMs. This was the first thing. And that the musicians, like outside of Poland, because I think it was 2009, 2008, 2009, and I think there was no custom IEM manufacturers in Poland. I've seen that in the US.
You found a niche. You find a hole in the market.
Yes, and I knew that it has to grow. It has to grow in the future. Once I almost forced my colleagues to play one rehearsal with over-ear headphones. There was a lot of sound leakage and stuff like that, but it was heaven compared to the hell of working without the headphones. So I thought, okay, so the IEMs must be, the way to go. And I started thinking how to get IEMs for me. And since I was a kid, basically, I thought, the cheapest way would be to figure out how to do it and just do it. And these were the times, basically, when I found Headfi, because there was this thread. This thread. It was called DIY custom IEMs. I think this thread still exists, and there were people there who were like exchanging some knowledge about making IEMs. So I started digging. I watched some YouTube videos of some brands from the USA. I started, to figure out what kind of elements are they using, what kind of, materials, etc., etc. And my girlfriend at the time, I was studying acoustics, and she was basically studying to become the person that deals with hearing aids. Audiologist. Yeah. Thank you very much. So I just thought, okay, so I'm gonna ask her to do the shell, and I'm gonna figure out how to connect the internals, the speakers, because I did have some background at least from the university. So I thought I'm going to figure it out. These were the times where Knowles started to manufacture. I think they were manufacturing for a few years already the drivers that were aimed at high fidelity equipment. They probably evolved from their earlier constructions, but these were like TWFK series and CI series. And as far as I'm concerned, they were already targeted at maybe not high fidelity audio, but at least in monitoring, in-ear monitoring. So yeah, I started with these basically.
My first introduction into this is based, Shure, the company Shure, right? Mm-hmm. And they had the I think it's the SE215, the predecessor to that. It was in the early 2000s, and I was based out of Denver, and I was traveling a lot for a living, a lot. And and wearing headphones is hot. You and I both know that.
Yeah.
If you wear them for a long time, your ears sweat and it's not very comfortable. I got the Shure and I didn't know that they were in-ear monitors back in the early 2000s, but you roll the foam, put it in your ear. I didn't hear anything. This is great. And then turn the music on, and all of a sudden Tool came alive. Wow, this is great, right? I can really hear this, right? And it isolated, and all these people around me are wearing, Bose headphones and all this sort of stuff. And I'm wearing these IEMs, and I'm like, you guys are dumb, right? Because this is much better than what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
There was a professor speaking during one of the talks. I forget her name, but she was from Berkeley, not Berkeley, California, but Berkeley up here in Massachusetts. And she was teaching a course in, hearing loss and sound engineering. It was just like an hour session. It was fascinating. And she was the sound engineer on Purple Rain and Around the World in a Day. Right? So she was Prince's sound engineer. And which just blew me away. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about that right now. But she was saying that musicians and people who love music hear music differently.
Okay.
And she said that musicians who are, who study music and play instruments early in life, their hearing actually develops even more than somebody who doesn't. There, and she said, but it develops in a different way. It becomes incredibly analytical for specific things in the music, not listening to the whole thing together. She said, just because you play an instrument doesn't make you a good conductor. Okay. So, because what's the conductor doing? The conductor's up there and he's mixing. He's mixing live, right? He's saying you up, right? You down, down, you. Okay, everyone's in sync now, right? So she said she doesn't play music. She can't play any instruments, but she's got a good ear. She can hear how it needs. She's the conductor. She knows how it needs to be mixed. What is your take on that? What did you learn? Because you actually went to school for this. What did they teach you regarding this?
Oh, thankfully, I don't remember what they were.
You drank too much beer.
Maybe yes, maybe not. If my mother is like watching, I'm not gonna say anything. Basically, because what I've learned in school, on my university, like what I'm thankful for, basically, I've learned because we did have some very strong basics there. So physics, mathematics, signal processing, and physics in terms of every form of vibration, whether it's electromagnetical vibration or mechanical vibration or whatever. The sound behaves in also not really intuitive way. If you are familiar with, with fluids, with the flow, etc., you might get, actually, my favorite things was called electromechanically acoustic connections or whatever, because I've learned that like electromagnetic field and electromagnetic waves and sound waves, they do have many things in common. So it's a funny thing, and I feel a little bit like karate guru or whatever. I started to think like sound. I started to understand what sound does, how this energy propagates, how it reflects, when you have to treat, another weird thing, when you have to treat the sound as a wave, and when you can treat it as a particle, because it all depends on the wavelength, etc. So this was, I think, the first and most important thing about sound and acoustics. Second thing, which is absolutely awesome, is that I did have very small group of students in my university, because I think it was like about a dozen of us. So it was extremely tiny. And all of my co-students were pretty much crazy about the music and sound. So I think I've learned even more after the lectures, just by discussing things, just by, because somebody was recording music, somebody was creating some instruments, they were soldering new equipment, etc. And we were constantly, apart from drinking beer, which was kind of obvious, we were constantly talking and exchanging some ideas. I'm not sure if on other like universities or whatever, if people are that crazy about the substance that they are studying. So this was the second thing. As about the music itself, we did have a lot of lectures further down the road about sound engineering and sound production. So, all these equalizers, filters, sound processing, etc., how to mix, how to add some boom to the kick, or, where is the click in the kick, etc., etc. A lot of theory, and to my actually not as much practice as I would like. I practiced on my own, and I practiced later because later in life I also toured for one summer, thankfully, with a rock and roll band as a front of house and monitoring engineer. So I did on-hand experience with the sound production, and I think I see myself as a person, and I'm very happy about it, that I do have like this mix of analytical and technical thinking about some theoretical background. I'm also musician, so it's a thing that when you are a musician, probably you learn a little bit more to analyze your own instrument. But for an example, as a bass player, it's extremely important to serve the song, to be a part of rhythm section, because there are some like solo bass players, but you can't really get a gig by soloing bass guitar. You need to be in the pocket, basically. So you need to serve the song. I approach the sound thing from many different perspectives, and I can't really tell which one is like extremely dominating. It seems to me like they are pretty much working in harmony.
The acoustics within the IEM shell, how much of an impact does that actually have on the lower frequencies or the higher frequencies?
In terms of, for the low frequencies, the acoustics of the shell itself, like the geometry doesn't have much influence.
I didn't think so.
And
yeah, I didn't think so. Whereas if in a room, of course, it's massive, right?
Yes. Yeah.
For headphones, even maybe when you have the headphones over your ear, the acoustics of whatever's here might have more of an impact. But for the IEM itself, because you're channeling, right? You're actually taking that driver and you are channeling it to the nozzle, right?
But like I said, the geometry doesn't have an impact. What we are entering here is rather like vibroacoustic thing. So probably I'm not gonna get into any voodoo or whatever. The sound wave that we are perceiving is a sound propagated in air, basically.
Yeah.
And also there are like material waves. So there is a like vibration in the material. And basically what earphone does is changing the vibration in the material to the vibration of the air.
Through the pressure fluctuation, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the construction of the IEM, the weight of the IEM, the weight of the driver, these are some things that might affect the sound perception. Yeah, and also the ear tips, both how they seal, what they are made with, do they enable any leakage of the air? What is the impedance of the leakage of the air, for an example, so we are getting into much more details that change the perception of the low end.
A review of one of your competitors' IMs, a really good one. Or to Ears Macbeth. And I'm sure you listened to it when you were at CanJam. Yeah, and they use a bass BA. They don't use a DD, but typically I'm not an all BA guy. I like to feel the slam of a dynamic driver. Whereas the BAs they drop off too fast. They have too much decay, right? There's some special driver that they're using called the Diablo. And what I was hearing was something that was much more similar to a dynamic driver than a BA. And I was wondering if they were doing a phase shift. Where at the same frequency, if you overlap and you put it out of phase slightly, you're going to get a thicker note, which is going to simulate let's say the BA not dropping off as fast. It's going to be more like the dynamic driver and continue that, make it a little bit thicker. What are your thoughts on that with what's happening in technology? Is that something that you guys are looking at? Are you guys looking at the phase shift? It's a couple of questions there, but take your time. Take your time.
Okay, first of all, I have no idea. We would have to ask Ricardo from 40 years. Actually, right now I got this idea because most of the BAs, at least a few years ago, they were extremely similar one to another. You know, they have the same, pretty much the same diaphragms, the same armatures. So the moving part was pretty much the same. What they could differ by the size of the diaphragm, but I don't think that they were different thicknesses, for an example. I'm not sure. There could be like double BAs or whatever. And they had very stiff suspension. I'm not sure if the BAs do have the diaphragm suspended, or maybe, you know, the diaphragm is like fixed and the suspension is not needed because the diaphragm is slightly moving on its own. And this makes the BA extremely fast. Like you said, that you like this decay, this, like, I call it like the tail, especially behind the low nose, that it feels the air a little bit, which is familiar for us, because normally when we perceive the sound, especially in closed spaces, we experience a lot of decay because of the standing wave in the room. So we expect that. It's natural for us, you know, that, you know, the sound lasts a little bit longer. But my idea, and this is the question to Ricardo, actually, whether they maybe used a BA with like heavier diaphragm, with a more, with a different suspension. Because if you know, the BA, the principle behind BA is pretty similar to principle behind the dynamic driver. Basically, you have alternate current, you have a coil, and the coil, you know, it moves and it moves something. That's it. The balanced armature is called because, you know, the diaphragm is connected with an armature to the coil, so it's extremely light, thin, etc., etc. But if you would make it like much thicker, and you would surround it with much less stiff suspension, then it would slowly decay, probably. So maybe, if they have like their own, maybe they engineered their own BA. I remember, for example, because, you know, all these years, most of the manufacturers were using like either Sonian BAs or Knowles BAs, which, like I said, were very, very similar one to another. But it's a funny thing. There was this earphone. It was Shure. I think it was 315. I think it was between all DD, single DD 215 and BA 2405. Anyways, Shure made their own BA, but it had like some sort of plastic enclosure. So they were making their own, but it was very extremely odd. Like I said, most of the BAs are engineered in totally the same way. Maybe Ricardo or the guys from his company or some other company, they engineered like different BA, because it would be kind of cool. And if they didn't, we need to do it. Because it's a great idea.
It is, and you listen to it, so you know that how the bass was on that set. It was quite amazing. Let's talk about the Maris.
Okay.
Let's talk about Maris.
All right, the blue one.
The blue one.
Oh, this one.
You call it the blue one. Right. I love this. This is a great idea. It really is. It's I haven't completed the review on this. This is the first step, and that is talking to you, right?
Great.
This is the first time I've done this, where I'm talking to the manufacturer before I'm actually going to be releasing a review on
All right.
So far, 2 thumbs up. It's going well, right?
You heard it,
And
Leslie.
that this takes, and I'm going to use an old adage.
Mhm.
This takes to EQ, the PEQ that I made, like a hobo on a ham sandwich. Okay, so it really likes
Yeah.
PEQ, and that's because the quality of the drivers that are in there are able to ring out, right? And I know you get it. Some manufacturers may see what I'm doing as a bit of sacrilege because you have the blood, sweat, and tears you pour into the sound signature of this. It's a lot of work, right?
It is. Yeah.
Right. I almost liken it to being a little bit of a rev head where you buy a sports car
Yeah.
and then you tune it even more, right? And you're going to get more out of it, right? Because what I'm going to take this for a drive. I'm going to see what it really, 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 really capable of. So you've put together an ensemble, and what I'm trying to do is push it. So that's when I set up the PQs. And I'm not saying that what I do is going to sound good for everyone because everyone has different ear. The feedback I get, right, when I send all these PQs out is, wow, you've unveiled it. It's like lifting a veil.
Yes.
Right. And you've heard this already.
Yes.
And I've sent you the PQ array, and we haven't gone through your selections for the songs yet. And if you haven't done that yet, that's fine. We can certainly, yeah. Okay. So we'll wait for that to add to this as well. So we'll get your sound impressions. We'll actually see where you and I like line up on the graph and see, oh yeah, we're here or here. And you've got a spread that says, well, actually what I like is I like a little bit more treble, like a little more bass. Maris, like I said, I love it. I also love Incognita. I think that this is another great IEM, and it's much cheaper.
It is.
Right? It's much cheaper. This to me is not as refined. It's not as textured. But the tonality, the reproduction is spot on. I love this. I think I was listening to stuff and I was like sending you like, this is great for heavy metal, and then I send you the Morrissey. You're like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
That was the song after Metallica in my playlist. I go from Metallica to Bengali and platforms. And the reason I do that during the testing is so that I hear a large variety and I hear a big shift. I don't want to be listening to a heavy track and then go to another heavy track. What's the point? Tell me about the difference. So if you were doing a sales pitch on this, what's the difference between the Maris and the Incognita, and who do they suit, and why would you buy them?
Well, the basic difference is color.
Color. Come on. I know you.
Okay. Yeah. That would be for less interested audiophiles.
Yeah, and you don't have to give up the trade secret of the sauce. You just,
No. Okay. My first impression I know that I've designed them, etc., but I try to approach them as a listener. And for me, the difference between Incognita and Maris is that the way they present different tracks, the way that they differentiate music, so to speak. I would say that Incognita it's a very high fidelity equipment. So you're gonna hear a lot of, first of all, you're gonna hear a lot of details in sound, and you're gonna be able to be extremely analytical about it when you will pay attention. On the other hand, if you have this day that you just want to enjoy the music, it's not overly analytic, because I like the details in audio equipment in general. I like the details just to be there and just be waiting for you to pay attention to them, not just simply attacking you, like jumping on you, like there were like some, wild animals. So I know I know that my or Limeer's house sounds compared to some maybe other manufacturers. Some people say it's a little bit laid back. It's not that bright. It's not that, overly analytical and overly detailed or whatever. I have also this idea, which is I noticed like few years ago that IEMs went on a kind of analytical war or treble war. I've seen like many emerging constructions that my initial impression was that they are trying to impress you within first 15 seconds of listening. so to speak. If you, especially if you're not a very experienced listener, if you're going to be attacked by the detail, initially you would say, oh, it's so revealing, you know, it's so different than, you know, other sound equipment that I've heard to date. But to me, at least, like if the sound is too detailed, it's impossible for me to retain a good relationship with the equipment along the longer spans of time, because I want, you know, I want to buy them and listen to them for months and years. And maybe I can change something because I fancy to do so, not because I'm subconsciously tired of this exaggeration in detail. So I think that both this model, they share this. You ask me what are the differences, but I think I've said right now what are the similarities.
That's the house sound, right?
That's the house sound, yeah. In terms of how different they are, I would say, like, first of all, the Incognita, it presents different recordings, keeps them a little bit, like, so to speak, glued together. So you don't get this like quantum leaps between tracks from different, you know, decades or from different genres or anything. I think that the word all-arounder describes...
That's a good way to look at it.
Yes, kind of. Whereas Maris, for an example, I got to admit I did have a little bit difficult relationship with Maris, because when I've done it, I was pretty happy about the tonality and stuff like that. But I noticed that there are many recordings which I liked, which sound weird on Maris. A little bit weird, not totally weird, you know, but there is something, you know, when I listened to them on Incognita, they were like, okay, you know, for an example, okay, when I was younger, I listened to some metal. For an example, first Korn album, it's 1994. You know, and on Incognita, it's like, okay, cool. It's like, it makes total sense. On Maris, for an example, you see that, you know, the vocals are a little bit further away and in a little bit different, weird shape. You are starting to analyze what kind of preamp, what kind of microphone did they use, you know? They are a little bit, it's less coherent, so to speak. But my theory, at least I came to this conclusion after a while, is that Maris rather reveals more about the recording. So it doesn't make recordings sound weird. It rather retains their original character, which slightly disappears on some other devices, and it slightly disappears on Incognita, you know, because the Incognita is like, I have this analogy, it's like Incognita has more ketchup, you know, because ketchup, if you add ketchup to any food, it tastes a little bit like the same, you know, and with Maris, you get everything sauté. So it's especially, for me at least, especially in terms of pace, because the spatial relationships between parts of the sound image, so the space, and it's much easier for me to hear pretty specific character of each tracks. Like I said, I would say that, you know, these are like the microphones, the preamps, the cables, because sometimes you get like different, you know, devices used on different tracks, and they don't necessarily, maybe I wouldn't say that they don't match each other, but you can hear the differences, and on the first glimpse you say, oh my God, you know, it's like, it's weird. Why did the sound engineer decided that? Why did they mixed it like that? Why did they put it here? Why did they gave it this reverb, and this reverb, oh my God, it seems like it's not very natural. It's like digital reverb from the 80s or whatever, and you haven't heard it in other recordings. And at the first, you know, approach, for me, it was slightly disturbing. And I got used to, and I had to rekindle my relationship with some of my favorite albums. So I'm happy about that, that there's a lot more of sound substance to it, which you need to get used to. At least I needed to get used to it. Eventually it did happen. Yeah, so I would say, it's a long answer for sure.
No. I love the answer, by the way. I love the answer because you've said it in a different way than I think, but you're saying the same exact thing that I think. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. So basically that's that. And the Maris has a little bit more bass. A little bit. I would say so, at least. I know that many people judge IEMs, and it's like it makes some sense to judge some IEMs based on the frequency response, but I'm more and more convinced about the idea that the character of the IEM and of the transducers and stuff like that lies within like time response. It's not about, because frequency response, it gives you some sort of average, and the time response, the transient response, the subtle phase relationships, this is what makes, I have this saying that if it would be everything would be about EQ, you would be able to EQ Bryan Adams into Tina Turner, which
you can't.
It's not gonna happen. You can, because it's about how they are built. It's about like 1,000 little parts that are vibrating in a little bit different ways, and our brain and ultimately our soul recognizes it's either him or her or one of 7 billion other people. So so our ability to analyze very subtle hints which lie within in time domain rather than in frequency domain, we are hardwired to sense that, and so that's why I was I was kind of smiling when I was saying that Maris has a little bit more bass, but it sounds different, and to me it more conveys the information about space and the character of the different sounds.
With that, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for visiting Duckblock Tuning and finding the sweet spot. Your comments are very much appreciated. I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. Share the PEQ settings with you if you own these particular IEMs or if you plan on purchasing them to maximize your investment. Again, thank you so much for supporting the project.